Okay, welcome to Empire State Development's Division of Minority and Women's Business Development MWBE Training Tuesdays webinar series. My name is Michelle Olvero, Program Manager in the Business Development Unit at Empire State Development. I hope that everyone is remaining healthy and staying safe during this time. Today's webinar topic is Elevate Your Elevator Pitch, and it is my pleasure to introduce to everyone Kate Baker, Interim Director at the Albany Small Business Development Center, or SBDC as we like to say, one of our great partner organizations. However, before we begin, let's take care of some housekeeping issues. We have already muted your phone, so participants do not hear a lot of background noise during the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, both audio and visual, and the PowerPoint presentation as well as recording will be emailed to all registrants. We encourage you to ask questions through the chat and Q&A boxes, which we will address at the end of the presentation. Lastly, there will be a short survey that'll pop up on your screen. We would very much appreciate your feedback. And without further ado, I welcome Kate Baker.
Thank you, Michelle. So good afternoon, everybody. I am Kate Baker. I'll be your presenter today. And so let's get right into it. So when it comes to elevator pitches, there are actually 4 different types of pitches that you should have. The first one is what we call the stand-up pitch, and that is the pitch that when you're at a networking event, they go around the room and they ask everyone to take 30 to 60 seconds to stand up and tell everyone about their organization. The second version of your pitch is more of that conversational pitch. This is the pitch that you're going to use when you're at a networking event and you're meeting people for the first time. And you know, in today's world, those networking events are not always face-to-face. And so it's converting what you want to say about you and your organization in a concise manner, but yet in a conversational tone. And then there are 2 versions of pitches that you should have for when you attend events that are in a trade show format. So if you are an attendee of a trade show, you should have a version of your pitch so that you can introduce yourself to the different booth representatives that again is going to be clear and concise and a little bit relative to the situation. And the same it goes for the people that are manning the booths. Having an elevator pitch that is slightly different than your traditional stand-up pitch is helpful to have in that booth environment and is a little bit varied from what you would do in a stand-up situation. So when you're putting together your elevator pitch, you're going to start with the stand-up pitch, and then you'll be able to take that pitch and put it into different variations so that you're prepared for all of those different situations. When it comes to putting together your pitch, it's important to note that there are some common traits of all great pitches. The first one is that a great elevator pitch is concise. It should also be short. When you're giving your pitch, it should sound effortless. You should be comfortable with what you're saying, and you should have had enough practice in preparing your pitch that when you are giving it, it doesn't sound as though you are putting too much effort into it and you're trying to remember what you're supposed to say. Around those terms, but you should also work on sounding natural. That natural sound, that conversational tone, whether it's a stand-up, a conversation, a booth environment, you want to sound natural. If you sound too forced and overly practiced, it's going to come across as a little bit odd to the person who's listening to the other end. The next 2 pieces are going to make a lot more sense as we move into the presentation. But it's really important that in your pitch, you have a what and a how. And so the what is what you do and the how is how you do it. There are also some common traits of really bad elevator pitches. And these are the things that if nothing else you want to avoid. It's really important not to ramble when you're giving an elevator pitch. If an organization or an event organizer gives you 30 seconds to 1 minute to share information about your company, you need to do it in the time frame that's allotted. When you go over, you're actually taking time from someone else at that event, whether it's another presenter, another component of the program. So rambling is just going to make you look confused about what you do as well. And you shouldn't have too many details. This is a first introduction, high level view of what it is that you do. And along those lines and not taking too long, you also don't want to be vague. So it's a delicate balance between not being vague and yet not too detailed. And ideally, by going through a multi-step process that I'm going to go over with everyone today, you'll be in a better position to put the what, the how together in a clear, concise manner that meets the time frames that you're looking for. When developing your pitch, it's always important to be positive, be confident, be selective in the information that you're sharing. It should have a relatively logical order, should have a call to action to the person that you're talking to. And most importantly, you should keep it under a minute. And when you're calculating how many words that equals, you want to plan on your total pitch, including your name and your title, being less than 65 words. And so that's how you will be guaranteed to keep it under a minute. If you give yourself 1 second for every word and a few extra seconds for those really short words, you'll be able to fit that 1 minute classification. Some things you should definitely not do in your pitch. So you don't want to brag. It's important not to drop brand names unless it's directly related to your what or your how. Make sure you don't use industry jargon. I'm sure the Empire State Development folks will understand this. But those of us that work in economic development, we use acronyms like nobody's business. Every government agency has at least 100 that they like for themselves. But you don't want to use those in your pitches if at all possible. You can't assume that the person that you're talking to is going to know what you're talking about. So make sure you use the words and not the initials. And if it's an industry specific thing, make sure the words are going to represent you appropriately in the environment. And most importantly, don't take too long. If you have a minute, you have a minute. So you want to make sure that if you're trying to keep it under 65 words, you don't end up at 80. It's fine to end up at 66. It's great to end up at 60, but you don't want to be the person that has something that's intentionally too long for the time frames. When you're delivering your pitch, this is going to be really important because pitches are almost always delivered in some form of person-to-person contact. So that can be face-to-face, not right now, but that can be face-to-face. It can also be over the telephone, or it could be on a Zoom chat. It can take a lot of different forms, but there is that person-to-person contact. And believe it or not, even if somebody can't see your face, your body language behaviors sometimes will carry through into how you come across. If you're smiling while you're speaking, people will be able to tell. I know it sounds strange, but if you work with anybody who's ever been in telephone sales, they always refer to it as their telephone voice, and it's kind of a persona that they take on when they pick up the telephone. The same thing is going to be true for your elevator pitch. You want to have a very clear persona. And so if you have a smile on your face and you have the appearance of engaged so the person is directly in front of you, it will have the same effect on a computer screen and it will have the same effect on a telephone call. You want to, if you're lucky enough to be able to make eye contact with somebody, you want to maintain that eye contact. Along those same lines, if you're smiling, even if it's behind a mask, people will be able to tell when you're giving them eye contact what your facial expressions are doing. They might not be able to see the smile, but they can see the other ramifications of the smile on your face. You also want to do your best to speak clearly. And so this is really hard for people that get nervous about speaking in public or talking to strangers. And there's a couple of suggestions, tips I have for that. The first one is, if you hear yourself going too fast, take a deep breath, force yourself to slow down. I don't get as nervous as I used to be when I'm giving presentations, but one of the tricks that I used to do is I would have my hand either next to my leg or in a pocket where somebody couldn't see it. And I would slowly tap my finger and I would try to match the cadence of my voice to how my finger was tapping to slow myself down. And I found that to be pretty effective. But it does get easier with practice. The more that you do it, the easier it gets. And then that same practice is going to apply to your delivery, right? The more comfortable you are with your elevator pitch, the more memorized it is, the more times you've said it out loud in front of a mirror, the easier that it is going to be to give it in a public setting. And then most importantly, it's going to be important to pass the mic. Anytime you're in a situation where it's a networking based activity, and that's again, whether it's in person, at a trade show, on Zoom or WebEx, on a telephone call, it's important to not monopolize that person's time. Because although you meeting them may have been one of your goals, them meeting somebody else may be one of their goals. And so it's important to make sure that you free up the person that you're talking to so that they can accomplish what they need to at that same event. So when it comes to the successful components or the components of a successful pitch, there are three primary components. The first one is your personal details. The other is what I call the what. And the third one is what I call the how. I'm going to give you my pitch and we're going to dissect it so that hopefully it will make sense so that you can apply it to yours. So here we go. Good morning. My name is Kate Baker and I'm the Interim Director of the Small Business Development Center at the University of Albany, where we help small businesses achieve big dreams through no-cost one-on-one counseling services tailored to meet the needs of small businesses. How can we be of assistance to your business? So that's my pitch. Short, it's actually under 30 seconds. I like to say less if I can get away with it. And hopefully it wasn't too fast when I gave it. So when it comes to the personal details, you need to include three basic things: your name, your title, and your organization. So in my particular pitch, it's good morning, my name is Kate Baker, and I'm the Interim Director and the Small Business Development Center. Now, this is one of those areas that you don't have a ton of control over how many words that you take up in this section, right? Your name is your name, your title is your title, and your company name is your company name. I have a really short name, which is great, but I have a very long company name, right? The company that I work for is, if you take out all the small words, 6 big words, which can take time to say. And that is just going to be one of those situations that it is what it is. So for your personal details, that's where you're going to start. Then you need to get into the what. So this is where you need to communicate what you do, what you're selling. It's a high level overview. You don't want to get into any details if at all possible. Yet be descriptive. It's a good place to look for some of this information is to pull from your mission or vision. So because it's a higher level overview and I'm not getting into a ton of details, my what is help small businesses achieve big dreams. That's what we do. We do that through a lot of ways, but that's that high level overview. I'm lucky that I was able to, convert our what into 6 words. You want to make sure that when you're putting yours together, that you keep it under 25 words. Because if you're taking more than 25 words, it's really too much detail. And at some point, the person's going to stop listening and zone out. So that's where if you can keep it really concise, bigger picture, high level, refer to some of your mission vision documents to get some of that language and phrasing. I love thesauruses, and I love working with other people to kind of brainstorm how to phrase stuff. I am far and away the worst person at naming stuff. So I was very proud when some friends led me down this pathway. After you have your what, You then want to include your how. So this is kind of the how you do the what. It's a good place for your unique selling proposition or your competitive advantage to come into play. And it can also involve some of your business process. So in the instance of the Small Business Development Center, we help businesses achieve, help small businesses achieve big dreams by providing no cost, one-on-one consulting services tailored to meet the needs of the small business owner. That is how we help small businesses achieve big dreams, right? So that's my how. Again, it's not too much detail, but it's a little bit more detail than what you would have in the what of your elevator pitch. But you're not getting too heavy into the nitty gritty. We're not getting into any industry jargon, so it's not too detailed. It's also not too vague. You're able to associate the visual of what we do through this phrasing. And you're going to want to do the same thing for your business. Once you have your what and the how, you can also throw in, this is the optional section of the program, but I find it sometimes helps if you're looking to create a conversational starter, especially when you're standing up in front of a group of people or you're on a Zoom chat for the first time, and it's a new technology and you're looking to move it from everybody going around the room to somebody wanting to engage with you on an individual basis. So a lot of times a good hook is a question. It can be a call to action, but it should have some level of engagement, ideally with the people that you're speaking to. My hook is, can we be of assistance to your business? And hopefully that's going to prompt someone to think, well, I wonder how they could help me. Maybe I should talk to her. Maybe I should engage with her offline. Maybe I should look for a time that we can maybe sit down and see what they do, or maybe I should check out their website, right? So that hook is that optional piece, but it is the piece that becomes kind of that call to action as to why me telling you about myself matters. Once you have your personal details, your what, your how, and your hook, then it becomes time to put all of those parts together. And when you're combining the parts, if you want to keep it under a minute, you want to edit your content to 75 words or less. I prefer 65, but sometimes you just can't do it and convey what you want to convey. But in that combination of parts, a lot of times you're adding other phrasing so that your actual pitch itself will have a more natural appearance. So keeping it under 65 will give you a little bit of wiggle room to add the single letter words and the descriptive words that are going to help make it sound a little bit more natural and more like a conversational phrase. The next piece is, elevator pitches and their delivery are all about the practice. And even though we are all social distancing and we're not making as many face-to-face contacts, it's still important to practice your elevator pitch. It's also very important to do it in front of a mirror. And I know that sounds silly and it's hard for people to want to do it, but if you're not doing it out loud in front of a mirror, you're not going to see your own body language and what kind of visual cues you're giving to the audience that you're speaking to. And this is even more important in a digital framework when you're doing things on a video camera. I recommend that you practice with whatever technology you use for Zoom or WebEx or whatever in-person digital meetings you're having. Not only should you be aware of your own personal behaviors, you should also be aware of your backgrounds, because your backgrounds are going to say a lot about who you are. And if you don't have a background that's going to convey the image that you're trying to convey in the business community, we actually recommend that you do one of two things. One is more of a DIY. You can hang a piece of fabric from the ceiling to create that background that's just a solid color visual and give you none of the distractions that many of us have in our backgrounds because we're working in environments we weren't planned on. That's why you won't see a video of me right now because I'm in my guest bedroom. But be aware that you can do that. Sometimes just a single piece of single color fabric behind you can help create that visual. And if that's not an option, have somebody take a picture of you that's, a little bit more formal, of you in your at-home work environment, and have that be a stagnant picture so that they at least get the visual of what you look like, so that eventually when you're allowed to meet face to face, they'll be able to put a face to the name, to the voice. But you do also want to record and listen back to how you sound, what you're saying. Is it making sense? It will also help you time yourself. So that's going to be important too. Because again, with these elevator pitches, if somebody says 30 seconds, that's the amount of time you have. So once you have your larger 1-minute pitch, you also want to take a look at it and see how you can streamline it for that 30-second version. When it comes to modifying your pitch, so you have your stand-up pitch. Now it's time to think about, okay, how am I going to use this pitch in a conversational setting? So that conversational setting, again, is when you're meeting somebody to have a conversation, but you want to convey that same information. So you kind of, at that point, break your pitch apart and you have your script. For conversational pitches, you're actually going to take the how one step further, but understand that it's not going to be delivered all in one phrase, right? When you're talking to somebody and they say, oh, do you mind telling me a little bit about what you do? Then you give them your what. So we help small businesses achieve big dreams. And then they're going to say something back. Hopefully is, oh, that sounds pretty cool. How do you do that? Well, we do that by providing no-cost business consulting services tailored to meet the needs of the individual business owner. Oh, well, how do you tailor it? Are there any specific types of business services that you provide? Oh, well, yes, we have a couple of different categories. We consistently provide assistance with business plans and financial projections, market research, procurement, and certification assistances. Tell me a little bit about what you do, and then maybe I'll be able to help guide you as to how I may help you a little bit better. Right, so that's a conversational version of my elevator pitch. It's going to be question and answer and an actual conversation. The other thing that's going to be important in a conversational elevator pitch is that you make sure that it's not all about you all day, every day. You have to, that's where you're passing the mic, right? It's going to be important that you engage the other person so that you can learn about them. Any successful networking engagement involves two people learning about each other. If they only learn about you, you haven't really gained a ton because you don't know anything about them. A relationship requires two people, and networking is about relationship building. And relationship building is not transactional. It is a long-term investment in some of your marketing strategies. So you have to make sure that that conversational tone is a little bit different. When you're a trade show attendee and you're going to be looking at modifying your pitch for that, again, you're not going to stand up and give your full 1-minute pitch the minute you walk up to the booth. There is going to be a few elements of conversation based to the pitch, and then the how and the what may be modified slightly based on the event that you're attending. So it's going to be important that prior to modifying your pitch, you research who are the booth attendees. It's also going to be important that you research the type of event that it is. How much time is going to be available? How many people are going to be in the room? What's the volume going to be like? Because if you're at, for example, I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but the MWBE forum that happens in October, if you've ever been in the vendor room at the convention center, it's loud in there. So you don't necessarily have the time to have a quality long conversation without shouting at each other. So then you want to modify your pitch into as small as you possibly can. You want it to be more of a business card exchange and an agreement to have a conversation later, right? Where that's going to differ from a trade show attendee that's manning a booth, anybody who's manning a booth at a trade show should have some very specific goals about the type of people that they want to meet, the information that they're looking to convey about their company. So depending on what services and products you're highlighting at that trade show, you're going to modify your pitch so that it can become a little bit of a specific product or service showcase for what you have within your booth. It will also still need to be conversational so that you make sure that you're highlighting the right products or services to the person that you're speaking to. And then you're going to want to make sure there's some type of information exchange and an agreement for follow-up. In all of the trade show attendees, or all of the trade show pitch options, I like it instead of a hook per se, if you can include that follow-up action so that you know what type of follow-up you're going to request. It helps to have your calendar available on your phone. Sometimes it helps to be able to schedule those things right at the booth if it's not too crowded. But you do want to make sure that you can modify your pitch for any of these situations because pitches are not stagnant, right? You have your standard stand-up pitch that you're going to use, but then depending on what group I'm going to meet with is going to depend on which particular services that I may wish to want to highlight, especially in conversational settings. For example, if I'm going to an MWBE event, I'm much more likely to highlight our procurement assistance, our MWBE certification assistance as our primary services for that particular group. Whereas if I'm going to a technology event, I would be more likely to highlight some of our other technology specific programming. And by having those modifications ready to plug and play as needed, I'm always more confident and I feel better about having to get up and stand up and talk to a room full of strangers. Because, it's fun. So that's my overview of how to elevate your elevator pitch. I'm happy to take any questions that you have. Michelle, I don't know how we move forward from here.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Kate. That was very informative. And so now I open up the floor for the attendees. You can ask any questions that you may have in the chat and Q&A boxes. So I will just give a moment for folks to ask any questions they have.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, folks are always wondering, are we going to send the recording and PowerPoint out? Yes, we will. We are recording this now, and we will send the PowerPoint out to all of the registrants. And someone's saying, how do I see the recording? This will be in an email that we will send out. So a question to Kate here, what is USP on the how slide? Can you go back to that slide, Kate, and clarify?
Absolutely. So USP, this is a perfect example of why you shouldn't use jargon. So shame on myself. But USP is the unique selling proposition. It's also known as your competitive advantage. And so that is a good piece to put in the how. For our particular organization, our USP, unique selling proposition, competitive advantage, especially when comparing us to other consultants in the marketplace, is there's, well, 1.5 or 2, depending on how you look at the hyphen, is the 2 words, no cost, right? That's my unique selling proposition. That's what sets me apart from other business consultants that are working in the field, is that in order to work with us, it's not going to cost you anything. So if you can articulate what makes you unique in your competitive environment in a very small number of words, it's a great place to include it because it's going to convey something that ideally you want your potential customer to know. And it's going to convey it in a clear, concise, short manner. And if it is a potential customer of yours, hopefully they'll be able to catch it and it will resonate with them. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thank you, Kate. The question is, you gave that great tip about the DIY and perhaps putting cloth or so in the background. Can you just elaborate on that?
Okay, so like all of the people in the world, because I've been socially distanced for, I think, 6 weeks now. And I have participated in one too many information sessions and Zoom sessions and that type of thing. And I am one of those people that tend to notice the details sometimes. And in preparing for this particular presentation, I thought it was going to be very important to include some of these digital awareness things, because it's not something we ever had to pay attention to before. And so I started paying attention to people's backgrounds and the visuals that they were providing. And the one thing that I have noticed is that because nobody planned, this is not a, hey, I have this amazing home office because I work from home all the time and this is my, Zen, beautiful office sanctuary. Many of us have beds in the backgrounds, children running back and forth, dogs that like to stick their heads up, that kind of stuff. When you're doing these digital sessions and you're putting yourself out there in a digital environment, professionalism still matters. And so you want to make sure that, using your technology, I did this for myself, which is why I don't use my video screen anymore. And until I can rectify my own background. But, in my background, I've got, shelving, I've got a guest room bed, I've got, not that professional image that I want to put out. So, and I will rectify it, but you should be aware of it. Be aware of your surroundings, because many of us didn't have the opportunity to plan for the environment that we're in. We're doing the best that we can with what we have. And so if you're in one of those situations where you don't have one of those beautiful Zen offices like myself, a really quick way to cover up stuff that you don't want people to see is to just hang some fabric from the ceiling so that it, just like a curtain would, and it creates the fabric background and hides anything you don't want anyone to see. It doesn't have to be a big piece of fabric.
Yeah.
Where having your camera on kind of to test these shots is going to be important.
I think that's a really great point and a really great tip. The next question we have is, can you just talk a little bit more about pitch style when speaking to different audiences?
Absolutely. So most importantly, when it comes to pitch style, the number one thing that's going to be important is that no matter who you're talking to or the group that you're speaking to, is that you're authentic to yourself. If you are someone who, and I don't really know how to say some of this stuff without stereotypes, so I apologize. My intent is not to be offensive in any stretch of the imagination. But if you are somebody who, in all things, tries to have that much more sophisticated appearance, and you're going to a group that has a less sophisticated appearance, then there's a way to do that while maintaining your authenticity. It's also important that in giving your elevator pitches that, that I guess just authenticity is going to be really important. If you try to be something that you're not, it's going to show. So when you're modifying your pitches, depending on what group that you're doing and pitch style, I actually think there should be a tremendous amount of consistency, because you are who you are, and people prefer to build relationships with other people based on who they are. They're not always looking for somebody who's just like them, especially in professional environments. But if you try to be something that you're not, it actually is going to create a barrier to a relationship developing. I mean, we've all been to the networking events where you see someone who isn't comfortable in their own skin, and it's because they're missing some level of authenticity, and it creates a trust barrier almost from the get-go. So you want to make sure that when you're putting yourself out there, you always want to be professional. You want to be professional in your appearance. You want to be professional in how you treat people, but you also want to be true to yourself. So stylistically, you want to keep things the same. Content-wise, you really want to modify your content where you can based on your audience. So every business has multiple products and services, or I should say most businesses have multiple products and services, or how you communicate those products and services may be different depending on your market demographics. So depending on who you're talking to, the more options that you have for yourself on that plug and play for your elevator pitch, especially in some of those conversational situations, the easier it is for you to have those conversations and relate what you're selling to who you're speaking to. Probably about 15 years ago in my office, we all sat down and we created a master list of everything that we do. And then we took everything that we do and we created buckets for all of those different services that we provide. And so as a result, we have, 10 or 11 buckets that we can talk about. And then as conversations develop, we can get into what those individual services are under those buckets. And so that's how you can not necessarily stylistically modify your pitch based on the audience, but you can relate the pitch based on their needs. And so that gets a lot also into research before attending events. In networking, it's always important to know why you're going, where you're going, what's going to happen, and who's going to be there. If you know those 4 things, you can go in with the most important thing of any networking event, and that's a goal. You want to have a goal when you go, and then you want to have a goal of what you accomplish after the fact. And please, 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 please never have a goal of meeting everybody in the room. A really good goal if you're going to a networking event or participating in one of these new digital events that they're having now, a good goal is to meet 2 new people and reconnect with 5 people. The reason why you want to limit the number of people that you want to meet is that you'll have a better conversation with the person that you're meeting. And then in addition to that, it's easier to follow up with 2 people than it is 100, and you actually stand the chance of taking a relationship and moving it forward. The goal of reconnecting with 5 people that you already know, it's because relationships don't survive if they don't continue, right? So having additional interactions with people that you already know, they don't have to be huge, they don't have to be in depth, but it's what's going to sustain that relationship for that longer term goal. And sometimes those relationships are not purely professional, right? The longer you know somebody, the more you talk to them, the more you do networking, the more you're going to know about them, and you're more likely to have the first question you ask is, how is your daughter, right? Because it's a relationship, and the more you're invested in someone else, the more they're going to be invested in you. And I think I took that a place that wasn't intended, Michelle, I'm sorry.
No, I thought that I'm actually really enjoying your responses. The next question here, because I do think it's relevant and connected to the next question. So they're saying, is there any specific information you recommend having on your business card that helps reinforce your elevator pitch? So for example, a WBE, should they add certification logos or acronyms?
So when it comes to business cards, I think it's more important that somebody can read it than what's on it, if that makes any sense in the world. And this has become more important to me as I get older and my eyesight is getting worse. So I also don't think you should have too much information on your card. If you're using a double-sided card, then you can put more information on the back than you can on the front. But to me, the most useful business cards are those that have the person's name, their title, their contact information, their company name. And this is also something that can go into your elevator pitch if your company has a tagline. Right, so a tagline is a good way to convey information as well. And many times you can pull something from your elevator pitch to create a tagline, or vice versa. So for my particular elevator pitch, helping small businesses achieve big dreams, actually became one of the taglines of our organization on a statewide level, because it conveys what they were looking to convey. And so we started putting that for those that can change their business cards. Some of our centers started doing that. But so keep your business card clean. However, on your marketing materials, if you can include any of the information from your elevator pitch, you can put components of your elevator pitch into your capability statement. You can put it on your website. You can put it on any videos that you do as your introduction. It can be used in multiple settings, but I wouldn't recommend the business card.
Okay, the next person said, can you offer suggestions for keeping your pitch fresh? So recently they had an experience where they realized someone had already heard their elevator pitch before. And so sometimes we go to these networking events, we might see a lot of familiar faces. How can businesses keep that elevator pitch fresh?
By evaluating how you communicate your what and your how. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've been using the same pitch for 10 years, minus the title changes over the 10 years. And I'm okay with people hearing it more than once. I believe the marketing statistic is somebody needs to hear something 7 times before they remember it. So I'm not as concerned with keeping it fresh. I do if I'm in a situation where I know people are in the room that have heard it before. I will usually make some type of very short self-deprecating joke as to, so for all of you that haven't heard this before, and yet for those that have already heard it, I'm sorry. And then I'll go into my pitch. But there is something to be said for some consistency. But if you're concerned about it needing some freshening, it is okay to, modify your what and your how. But unfortunately, many times your what and how doesn't change, which makes it hard to freshen. Where you want to freshen it up is in your conversational pitch deliveries. And that's really going to be how you drive the conversation. So you can use slightly different phrasing. You can mix up, the order in which you give people information. You can ask them to go first. Those are all ways to kind of keep it fresh. And then you can also reevaluate your buckets, which are those next pieces of the conversation of what's the nitty-gritty of what you do.
Great, thank you. This next question, I think we probably don't consider enough, but I think it's really important. And the question is, how does one with difficulties, so for example, autism, overcome the difficulty of being in real time and sensing interest from the listener?
So if you're somebody who struggles with different social situations, I strongly recommend that you work with a mentor for the organization that you're going to network with. And by having a mentor for that organization, you can have predetermined social cues to help guide you along that pathway. And many organizations will assign people that are new to networking or struggle with networking or just don't even know what they're supposed to do. You don't necessarily have to have a special need, but it's just you don't know what you're doing and you need somebody to guide you. If you have a mentor that you can have an open and honest conversation with about what your particular challenges are going into a networking event, they will assign somebody that is, well known within the organization, has a lot of contacts, and that can help guide you along the pathway. If you are somebody that struggles with social situations in general, having some of those predefined cues of, a hand signal for when it's time to move on, a hand signal for, you need to ask them a question now, those types of things can really help you in those situations. My personal experience with networking, I've been a mentor before. I found it to be very rewarding. And the people that are doing it because they want to help the next generation of networkers be successful with it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And, Kate, as you mentioned now, we're social distancing. We're doing a lot of work digitally and, through kind of web resources and things of that sort. So someone's asking, is it okay to add people from a web conference that they may have attended on LinkedIn and starting a conversation there? What's the best approach that you would say in circumstances like that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I just want to make sure I heard the question right so I don't take it somewhere I'm not supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. The question is it okay to add people from a web conference you attended on LinkedIn and starting a conversation there?
Oh, absolutely. We're using LinkedIn as a social media in ways that we haven't before as a business community. So I think you should start conversations anywhere that you can, especially if relationships are critical to your success in business. And it's okay to start email conversations. And there's so many different digital platforms that are out there you know, that can do different things, right? So the one that I use all the time is Zoom or WebEx, and those are platforms that are designed for very specific types of information delivery. But there's one called Hangouts where you can have like 8 people on a screen, and you can kind of treat it like a networking event where you're in a circle having a conversation with people. So there are different platforms, and so you want to investigate them all. But a great conversation starter to have on LinkedIn is, hey, I'm looking for a platform to do this type of networking with people I attended a conference at. And not only will it engage with your existing network, but it will start a dialogue, and you'll get some really great resources. I did that early on in the game because I had no idea what I was doing.
Great, thank you. Someone's asking for clarification on a trade show. Can you talk more about that and how they can access a trade show?
So trade shows are usually things that are done for specific industries or a particular conference, that type of thing. So if you've never attended, the MWBE forum that's done in the fall has a trade show element to it. And it's really going to be how you access them is going to be based on your industry and what organizations you're connected to. Chambers usually have small business showcases. Associations will usually have trade shows where they'll bring in, potential customers, but you see them a lot of times at conferences. Most of them are suspended right now. We have started to see some movement on digital trade shows, and I don't really know what that's going to look like yet. So I don't have a ton of advice on it. But for whatever industry that you're looking to sell to, if you just do a Google search of that industry and trade shows or that industry and associations, that's a great way to get started. If you're looking to do attend trade shows that are in your community, I would look to your chambers and some of the professional organizations that are located where you are.
Thank you. You're on the how slide now. Can you go back to the what slide and just provide any further tips on how a business can develop their what aspect of their elevator pitch?
Absolutely. So when you're looking at your what elevator pitch, I'm a visual person, so my advice is going to kind of go down that pathway. One of the things that we did in our office to kind of get to the point where it helps small businesses achieve big dreams, we had some luck in that. But one of the things that we did is we took some Post-it flip chart paper and we attached it to the walls, and we just started creating lists of what it is that we do. And so if you have particular products or services that you're selling, one of the great places to start is to just spend a week making lists of what it is that you're selling, and then step away from it for a couple of days. And depending on how long your list is, then revisit it and say, okay, how do I put these into different buckets, right? So think of a grocery store, they have a produce department that has all of their produce. So what are your different departments? And then once you've got your different departments, you can take that information and start to develop what that encompasses. What are 10 words that would describe that? What are 20 words that would describe all of those buckets without using any of the names of the buckets in that description? Because again, you don't want to get too detailed. It is supposed to be that higher level view. Another great place to start in developing your what is to go back to your company's mission or and a lot of times those mission and vision statements have that high level purpose of the company. And then you can use some of that language combined with your bucket language and come up with a cohesive statement to define your particular what.
Great, thank you very much. I think what you said answers kind of next two questions, but should your elevator pitch match the opening statement on your web homepage?
It doesn't have to, but there should be consistency in the messaging that you're offering. So, for example, you don't want to tell everybody that the sky is yellow in your elevator pitch, but the sky is green on your website, when in reality, your website is a yellowy, or when reality is a yellowy green, right? So you want there to be consistency. It doesn't have to be the exact phrasing, but hey, if your website has great phrasing, no need to reinvent the wheel. So it's absolutely something that you can take from your website. It's also something that you can take from your elevator pitch and put onto your website. Where the consistency comes in is kind of relates to that authenticity and consistency in messaging. So you just want to make sure that there isn't conflicting information between the two, but they don't have to be an exact match.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. And I think, when you talked about, identifying what you do, breaking them into buckets, I think that helps for this next question, but I'll just ask, what kind of exercises do you recommend for small organizations that have not yet developed a mission or vision or value statements yet?
So the best, all of these things, brainstorming sessions are great. But if you're a small organization that doesn't have a team that you can work with on brainstorming, you can build a team that doesn't necessarily work for you. So, but there's a couple of rules to developing that brainstorming team. You want it to be other professionals that work in either complementary industries or support organizations to help you. You want to keep your friends and your family away from it. Part of the reason is your friends and your family are going to tell you what you want to hear, and they aren't necessarily going to give you that honest feedback that you would get from a professional acquaintance or a professional contact. And so you can get some of that brainstorming from outside sources. But a brainstorming session is really the best place to start, because if you don't have it, it's hard to develop it when somebody tells you to. You can have all of that in your head and you can know it in your heart. But at the end of the day, when somebody tells you to sit down and write it down, that's when it becomes hard. I know from personal experience. So you're not alone in that. But having some other people give you feedback on how they see what it is that you do and how you should, and what they think your what and your how should be based on their experiences of dealing with you in a professional setting. It gives you a little bit of insight into how you're presenting yourself to the marketplace.
Absolutely. Thank you. And one last question here. We did talk about briefly a capability statement. Can you just clarify what that is, Kate, and also clarify whether small business development centers help with capability statements?
So absolutely. A capability statement is it's a one sheet of paper, and it should never be longer than one sheet of paper. Overview of your company related to government contracting. There are 5 key elements to it. One is the general company information. The next is kind of a list of what it is that you do. A third one is past customers, so that you can prove your capability. You should have any NAICS codes and certifications. There's a whole laundry list of information that should go on that. And yes, we absolutely provide assistance on capability statements. We have a lot of great resources. I just did one last week with someone. So yes, we do that.
Great, thank you. And do you have your email on the last page, or last slide rather?
Of course not. That would be easy, right? So my email address is the letter K, last name Baker, at albany.edu. However, if you would like to set up an appointment for an advisor, we're a statewide organization and we have 22 centers across the state. Every center has procurement advisors that can assist you with any of this type of stuff. To make an appointment with an advisor at any of our centers, especially one that's close to you, is what we recommend, just so that you can have a local person that understands your particular market. Our website address is www.nysed B as in boy, D as in dog, C as in cat.org. And when you get there, you can just click on make an appointment. There's a small form to submit, and it will go to the appropriate center automatically based on your zip code.
Okay, great. I was writing that in the chat box, so hopefully folks will get that information there. If you have any additional questions, we do apologize. Feel free to email myself, which I've added in the chat box, as well as Kate, and we can address your inquiries. Now I'm going to go into closing remarks. I really want to thank you, Kate, so much for your time today. I thought this was extremely informative, and I hope everyone has benefited from today's webinar. A few quick reminders. We will send out the PowerPoint presentation and recording to everyone. Please take a moment to fill out our short survey, and please stay tuned for our May webinar schedule. We're going to have topics that include the LIRR Third Track Project, the Belmont Park Redevelopment Project, as well as a great webinar and panel on COVID-19 business resources, what you need to know at this time, and also how to begin preparing your business for a post-pandemic world, so to speak. And also, if I have any friends here listening in from the Southern Tier, we are planning our Southern Tier Expo. It's going to be a virtual expo, and that is on May 28th. So please save the date, more information about that as well. I will email everything to everyone. Again, a very big special thank you to Kate, and I hope everyone takes care and has a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.